It is a crucial weekend for the Biden-Harris campaign as they try to address widespread concerns coming out of Thursday night's debate. Vice President Kamala Harris was in the battleground state of Nevada Friday afternoon. Harris offered a staunch defense of the president.
Earlier today, the president said himself it was not his best performance. We believe in our president, Joe Biden, and we believe in what he stands for. Listen, we've got 130 days, I'm counting, until Election Day. 130 days. And this race will not be decided by one night in June.
Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Robert Garcia. Welcome, Congressman. I think the Vice President makes a very important point. The big freak out Thursday night even stunned me. I mean, in politics, I mean, it's so immediate, so fast. And we were talking with former Lieutenant Governor Barnes about the fact that, you know, on the Republican side, it's like, oh, we're good. Our guy's a criminal, we're good. Our guy's a sexual predator, we're good. Democrats, oh my God, he slurred a word. What?
Well, he didn't just slur a word. It was a bad performance.
It was, I'm not going to take away from that. I got it. It was a bad performance, and it didn't meet anyone's expectations. But the thing that amazes me is just the immediate decision by so many in the party to just go, okay, I'm done. I can't do this. Explain some of that. I don't understand the thing, because on my side of the aisle, we're like, hunker down, you know, get the press release out, close the doors, we're going to work it out. When we go outside here, we're going to steamroll.
Alicia, Michael does like to beat up on the Democrats. I'm just saying, he's warranted here.
Brings back warm memories.
Yeah, it brings back warm memories from his chairman days.
I mean, look, I think what the reaction is essentially that people are obsessed, all of us Democrats, with beating Donald Trump. We know that democracy is on the line.
Right.
We know that the future of this country and our institutions are on the line. And so we are invested. We are all in to ensure that we beat him. And so, of course, we want to make sure that our debates are perfect. We want to make sure that the president performs at his very best. And so, you know, of course, when the president has a raspy voice or is not taking on maybe Donald Trump the way we'd like to see it, some people are going to get nervous. But let's be like crystal clear. Donald Trump is a liar and lied over and over and over in that debate. And President Biden told the truth. He was honest. He showed the kind of man that he is. He took on Donald Trump on the issues that he needed to take him on. And I am proud of our president. Democrats have rallied around our president. We are with him 100%. We saw that performance in North Carolina. We know that the president can deliver a message and take it to Donald Trump. And I'm fired up. We are going to win in November, and the party right now is united behind our president.
Let me ask a more specific version of Michael's question, which is, it's not Democratic voters necessarily who are freaking out. It is party establishment. So what do you say to the fellow members of your caucus who are the ones on background with reporters saying that they're looking for an alternative?
I would tell them, look at the grassroots fundraising. With the hours after the president left the debate stage, grassroots fundraising surged. We actually raised more money from prep debate than we've raised in this entire cycle. Look at that. The grassroots, the people that I'm talking to, they're backing up the president. We have the president's back. And so I would say to those folks, hey, it's fine. Not every day is going to be perfect, but let's focus on the big picture, which is defeating the most dangerous person to ever run for president or be the president is Donald Trump. That's the focus. Get on board. We're all there. We support the president.
You know, this point about the grassroots, I think, and the voters is an important one. And we are still, that's why in the immediate aftermath of the debate, I really wanted to know what some of the focus groups were saying, those dial tests, right? Like the as I like to call the regular real people, right? Who were like, how did they glean this? There was a focus group in Michigan that said they felt like Joe Biden won, and I was like, oh, that is okay. This is what real people are thinking in some places. And it harkens back, I think, to lots happened this week. Jamal Bowman lost his primary this week in New York, and one of the most effective attack ads against Democrats this cycle in a primary is that they undermine the Democratic Party agenda and they don't support the president. We've seen that in a number of races, and folks that have shored themselves up against that, like Summer Lee in Pittsburgh, same attack was lobbed against her, but you know she had establishment party endorsements. There were folks from the president who said that, like, look, she works with. They rallied around her, and she was able to blunt that. You juxtapose that with what we're hearing from some of the operatives and some of the elected officials, and it's kind of like we're living in two different worlds. Greg Meeks said in NBC News to our colleagues that he, in terms of the president, had a bad night, and he said, I think he's going to have to put himself out there more. I understand people are rallying around the president and the Democratic Party base in terms of the voters. Do you think, though, that there are any changes that the campaign should make?
Well, look, the campaign's always going to make changes. I mean, the campaign.
Right, but what are some of the changes you think they might should?
No, I think the campaign's rolled out a really effective strategy. I mean, obviously, I think that putting the president out with his supporters, like they did in North Carolina, was electric. Getting the vice president out there, like they're doing, is motivating the base. They're doing the work. And I think what your point, Simone, about the grassroots and the impression of the debate is important. It's not just voters in Michigan. There was also a focus group post-debate around Latino voters. These Latino undecided voters, and Univision and other networks participated in this focus group. Latino voters overwhelmingly thought that Joe Biden won the debate because they're hearing someone that's telling the truth. They're hearing Donald Trump attack migrants in the debate. They're hearing Donald Trump say that immigrants somehow create an uncivilized country, which is a quote from the debate, versus a man who stands up for working class people, for immigrants, for Latinos, for the entire community. And so the grassroots, the base of the party, what they saw on that debate, unlike some of the political chattering class, is a man who is honest, who tells the truth. Yes, he might be a little bit older and wiser, but he has the experience. That's our nominee. And one last thing, there's one person in this country who has defeated Donald Trump. And his name is Joe Biden, and he's going to do it again.
But that's an important point. There's no doubt about that. But I really think the strategist in my side of my head looks at this, and immediately after the debate was on our programming and made the point, and I think it was an important one, that this president was not served well in preparation for this debate. This president was put in an untenable position to do something against someone that would be largely ineffective. All Joe Biden had to do was be prepped to say, when every time Donald Trump finished the sentence, look at him and say, "You're a liar," and move on. Filling his head with data, trying to connect dots and do
that closing statement about taxes.
Right, exactly. Just let the man be in a space where he can emotionally connect to the American people, as he did in North Carolina the next day.
That's right.
That's the guy who should have been on the stage in the debate.
But you're saying he needed to be freed up to be that guy.
He needed to be freed up, and so this heavy-handed preparation, a week long of debate prep against Donald freaking Trump? Are you kidding me? Why do you need a week to prep against the guy?
Well, I'm going to defend candidates doing debate prep. I don't care if you're a mayoral candidate, a congressional candidate, a president. People need to prep.
You're talking to someone who's
I'm just saying, everybody is not you. You don't need
No, I'm just saying, no, I'm not saying you don't need a week to do what we saw. You don't need a week to do what we saw. Mm-hmm. Okay? That's what I'm saying. Because they overestimated of something who was standing opposite Joe Biden. And so I don't know if there'll be another debate, but I think to your point, Congressman, the more Joe Biden is on the ground in coffee shops, walking the malls, going to the neighborhoods, and being with real people and talking about real jobs, not black jobs or Hispanic jobs, whatever the hell that is, and connecting to people, I think that's going to be the thing that saves him with the American voter, who may right now be sitting there going, I'm not so sure.
Put a pin in that thought real quick. I want to take a listen to President Biden at Stonewall on Friday night. Get your reaction, and we'll go.
This beloved bar became the site of a call to cry for freedom, dignity, and equality, respect. You marked a turning point in civil rights in America. You inspired the hearts of millions of people around the world.
That's what's at stake.
Absolutely. I mean, look, the president understands what's at stake. He understands that there is a choice for voters this November, and it's serious. It's one of actually moving our country forward, or one where our democracy is going to be at risk. Where LGBTQ plus people, where people of color, where working class people, where union members are at risk. Donald Trump is the most dangerous candidate ever in the history of this country for the presidency. We saw that at the debate. And let's talk more about Donald Trump's performance. He lied and lied and lied, could not tell the truth one single time, and the fact checkers are saying that now. So I think at the end of the day, that debate, the president, obviously, they need to know what they know what they need to fix moving forward. But Donald Trump reinforced that he's a liar, and I think focus groups and post-debate information and polls are going to show that.
Congressman Robert Garcia, as always, so good to have you at the table. Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn. MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.